In this video, we'll talk about creating, maintaining, and changing organizational culture. This video is based on Chapter 2 from Lunenburg and Ornstein's Educational Administration, Concepts and Practices, published in 2011 by Cengage Learning. We will talk about, creating organizational culture and discuss things like values, heroes, rites and rituals, as well as communication channels. Components important in creating organizational culture. We will then discuss how organizational culture is maintained and how it can be possibly changed. So, organizational cultures, they are created, maintained, and changed through similar processes. And Deal and Kennedy identified 4 dimensions of organizational cultures that play an important role in creating organizational cultures. Okay, so they are values, heroes, rites, and rituals. And let's talk about each of these dimensions a little bit in more detail. So values, they affect behavior, and they are general criteria, standards, or principles that guide the behavior of organization members. And organizational theorists distinguish 2 kinds of values. The first kind is terminal. Terminal values describe a desired outcome that an organization is, aspiring to achieve. In schools, terminal values could be things like quality, excellence, and success. The second kind of values is instrumental values, and they describe a desired mode of behavior. And in the context of schools, instrumental values could be things like working hard, excellent teaching, respecting student diversity, creativity, commitment to teamwork, and overall commitment to high standards. Okay, so looking at these 2 kinds of values, it's clear that an organizational culture basically consists of outcomes that an organization is looking, aspiring to achieve, and of modes of behavior that the organization encourages, things described by instrumental values. Okay, so really schools, ideally schools, that schools' instrumental values help achieve their terminal values. And the idea, the importance of this 2 kinds of values and the entire concept of values is that for a school administrator in practice is that schools can achieve success only when shared values exist among its members. So sharing values, provide a strong organizational identity. They enhance commitment of everyone in the organization. They provide a stable social system, and they kind of reduce the need for excessive bureaucratic controls. Okay, so how can we, as school administrators or educational administrators overall, how can we create shared values in our organization? So there are some guidelines that could be recommended to achieve shared values. The first guideline is to make sure that there is a widely shared understanding of what a school stands for. This is typically, could be found in slogans that are used by schools. The next guideline is, to make sure that there is a concern for individuals over rules, policies, procedures, and things described in job duties. Okay. So the next guideline would be to make sure that there is a well understood sense of the informal rules and expectations, so that people working in an organization, the employees and administrators, they understand what is expected of them. Okay, the next guideline is to make sure that there is a belief that what people in the organization do is important. Okay, that it is important to share information and ideas. Next, there should be a recognition of heroes, people whose actions illustrate what the organization's philosophy and concerns are. And finally, the final guideline is to make sure that there is overall in the organization, there is a belief that rites and rituals are important for members of an organization. They are as important as building a common identity is. Okay, so let's talk more about heroes. Okay, as you know, most successful organizations have heroes, and these are people, who are really doing exceptional job. They have exceptional performance, and heroes can be born or created. Yeah. Uh, those who are born is pretty much clear. These are visionary institution builders who are just born out there, but there are also heroes that are created, right? Those people, whom the institution has made, the institution noticed and celebrated the work that they did, and by doing so, the institution itself created that kind of hero. Okay, heroes are important, and they support and perpetuate the underlying values of an organization. They provide role models for other employees. They symbolize the organization to others, and they set performance standards that are motivating for other members of an organization. Right. So you probably remember a hero from a school you studied at, right? This was probably a teacher who came in early, who was always willing to meet with students, and constantly improving his or her skills and performance. Another important aspect in creating organizational cultures are, rites and rituals. These are everyday activities and celebrations that characterize the organization. Okay, so most organizations, especially successful organizations, they typically manage these rituals and symbolic actions. Through these things, through the rites and rituals, it is possible to recognize achievement of people, right? So things like the Teacher of the Year award or National Merit Schools. So basically, for example, maybe if a new superintendent is appointed, there might be a number of specific ceremonial rituals, such as press announcements, other announcements, some banquets, meetings, and official speeches, things like that. An interesting thing related to organizational cultures and creating them is communication networks. Those stories about heroes, about things that happened in an organization, the myths existing in organizations, they should be transmitted, and they are typically transmitted by communication networks. Okay, and Deal and Kennedy, they came up of 5 roles that people that the important roles that members of organizations hold and which comprise communication networks. Okay, so let's stop briefly on each of those roles. So the first role is storytellers. So every company or every institution has storytellers. These people, they interpret what's going on in the organization, and the way they interpret what's going on, it influences how others perceive those facts, those happenings. Okay. The next role is priests. These are people who worry for the organization, and they kind of guard the values of an organization, right? They listen to people, they provide alternative solutions to problems. This is what priests do. And this is not like this is a name that is given by, Deal and Kennedy to describe kind of the role of these people, not like they didn't have these positions, of course. So the next role is whisperers. These are people who are, kind of close to the boss, and they have the boss's ear. They are kind of behind the throne, right? So if you want to get something done, you probably go to the whisperer, okay? The next role is gossips, right? These people, they, discuss the day-to-day trivial activities of the organization through the in communication network, and they are important also in building and maintaining heroes because they can embellish the heroes achievements and even exaggerate them. Finally, there is a role of spies, people who are they keep everyone well informed about what's going on in the organization. Note the difference between the gossips. They kind of focus more on like kind of major things, right? So communication networks consist of this. They should have this 5 key roles, people doing performing these 5 key roles in order to operate successfully and contribute to creating organizational cultures, okay? And overall, in creating organizational cultures in educational institutions, leaders, they are very important. They develop and maintain positive values and shared visions. They communicate core values and in turn, uh, because of such leaders, teachers, instructors, they reinforce values through their work, through their behavior. Even parents, contribute to the organizational culture by absorbing it when they visit school, by participating in governing the school, by participating in celebrations of successes of the school. So really, a biggest conclusion would be perhaps a biggest takeaway would be that strongest cultures in schools, have leadership coming from many sources, from more than one source. All right, so once you, as an organizational, as an educational administrator, once you've created an organizational culture, right, you want to maintain that culture. And there are 7 key mechanisms for what's called organizational socialization, and that describes basically the process of maintaining organizational culture. Okay, so let's discuss the 7 mechanisms. Right, the first mechanism is selection of staff. Right, so here you as an educational administrator or maybe your trained recruiters that you hire, you select people and focus on values that are important to your culture. If a candidate has personal values that do not fit with the values of your organization, then you probably kind of give them an opportunity to opt out or deselect. Okay. The second mechanism is orientation. So after you have chosen a new candidate, you have hired that person, you need to arrange considerable training to expose that person to the culture. Very often, humility-inducing experiences are used, in the sense that newly hired employees are given more work than they can reasonably handle, and they are assigned work for which maybe an individual is overqualified, right? Or work that senior professors or senior instructors, teachers do not want to perform. Like in a university, it could be like teaching the basic courses. I don't know, things like assignment to many committees, a heavy load, advisory loads, things like that, right? So basically, a newcomer should be conveyed a message which is you must pay your dues, okay? So that is orientation. So the next mechanism is job mastery, right? This step is really meant to develop, means to develop the employee's technological knowledge. As a person keeps, as a new employee keeps working, the organization evaluates that person's performance and assigns additional responsibilities based on the progress, right? And there are often steps that describe a possible career plan. For example, in the United States, some states have a 3-step career ladder process for teachers. Step 1 would be instructors, step 2 would be professional teachers, and step 3 would be career professionals and things like that. So that pertains to job mastery. The fourth mechanism is the reward and control systems, and they basically describe how individual performance is rewarded, right? Typically, reward systems are comprehensive, and they focus on the aspects of performance that that are connected to the organization's success and organization's values, right? So factors that are considered important for an organization's success are explicitly explained in this reward systems, right? So if a person is like violates the culture in his or her performance, if and that person is an administrator, instead of just firing that person, often they are transferred to a less important staff position. They get off their career track. That is a typical pattern used in large, more bureaucratic school districts. Okay. So the fifth mechanism is adherence to values. So as people continue working for the organization, their behavior, starts to more and more closely be matching the values of the culture, right? And this mechanism, ensures that because people identify with the common values of an organization, these people kind of justify the personal sacrifices they make at work, maybe working late, working a lot, enduring some ineffective management, techniques, things like that, right? So the sixth mechanism of organizational socialization is reinforcing folklore. That is, the exposure of members of an organization to rites, rituals, stories, and myths and heroes, which in the process portrays and reinforces the culture, right? So, here you would think of stories that are told in an organization, right? Maybe you can hear a story of someone who did something bad, and everyone is keeps telling that story in order to communicate to new members, like those things should not be done, right? That is reinforcing folklore. And the final mechanism is consistent role models, So typically, individuals who have performed very well, they are chosen or they serve as role models to newcomers. Okay, so by kind of identifying explicitly these people as symbols of success, the organization encourages newcomers to do the same. Right? So, okay, we discussed how organizational culture is created and maintained, but sometimes, one might need to change an organizational culture that exists, right? The process of change cycle begins, and organizational theorists have identified several components of the change cycle. Let's discuss each of them a little bit one by one, right? So the first component of a change cycle would be external enabling conditions, right? So basically, these are conditions that show that the environment will support the change of an organizational culture. Okay, so when we're talking about schools, perhaps external enabling examples of external enabling conditions could be things like scarcity or abundance of students, stability or instability of the external environment, and availability of resources, right? So basically, the external conditions, they describe the degree of threat to the organization's input sources, things like information, people, and materials. Okay. So the next component of the change cycle is internal permitting conditions, and they, it, you know, to increase the likelihood of an organizational culture change, an organization would need four internal permitting conditions. The first is a surplus of change resources. That means there should be enough time and energy from the administrators. There should be enough financial resources and other things that are necessary, beyond a normal operation, right? So things that would be necessary for changing the culture, right? The second internal permitting condition that would be necessary to increase the probability of actual organizational culture change would be system readiness. That is, most members, should be willing to embrace the anxiety and uncertainty of the change, right? And the third internal permitting condition would be minimal coupling. That is, that describes the coordination and integration of system components. So the looser the system, the easier it is to change the organizational culture. And the fourth internal permitting condition would be change agent power and leadership. That is the ability of administrators to actually design an alternative organizational culture. Okay. The next component of the organizational culture change cycle is precipitating pressures, right? Organizational theorists discuss four factors that may precipitate culture change. First, this is atypical performance. Maybe like there is a sudden drop in graduation rates of a university or something like that, right? Second is pressure exerted by stakeholders, right? Third, organizational growth or decrement in size. And fourth, real or perceived crisis, right? These are associated with the environment and the uncertainty in it, right? So perhaps, a coronavirus pandemic is an example of precipitating pressures, and schools are rapidly changing. Possibly their organizational cultures in response to having to deliver online learning, right? That's one of the possible things that could be considered as a precipitating pressure. So the next component of an organizational culture change cycle is triggering events. And typically, culture change doesn't begin in response to just one triggering event. There usually are more than one. Well, at least one would be necessary to begin a change, right? So examples are environmental, disasters or opportunities, administrative crisis, external revolutions, mandated by government policies, and internal revolutions such as if a new management team comes to an organization. Okay. So another component of the change cycle is cultural visioning, which basically describes an ability to create a vision of a new, better organizational culture, and that would require from a leadership to envision what a future is like, and to come up with a vision of a different organizational culture that fits better in that future. Okay, so associated with this cultural visioning, leaders would need a cultural change strategy and action plans, right, and specific implementations that should be implemented to actually change the organizational culture.